Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're going to officially get started to women in the golf industry and what we call our WIGI-pedia, which is our educational series highlighting our members, and Donna is a member, that share their experiences and their knowledge. And on alternate months, we also ask you to join us for what's called our Getting to Know You calls, where we introduce all of you and tell what you're doing in your own local communities, etc. Our mission is to connect and support women in the golf industry. It's simply that. We're just connecting all the women in the golf industry that we can on various walks of life. Many of you do know me, but my name is Kay McMahon, and I'm currently the president of WIGI, and I'm very happy to say that and very proud to be a part of this organization. Today's subject is the importance of women's sports and leadership with our WIGI member, Donna Orender. This has already kind of happened, but before we get to our main speaker, I'd like to recognize a few people in our audience. And I'm not sure if everybody's on just yet, but Sherry Major is the media consultant for the PGA exhibitions. Then we have Pat Baldwin, who's been a friend of mine, but she's also the former editor-in-chief for Golf for Women magazine and gave me my head start in writing. So I always love to recognize my friend Pat. And then we have another good friend, Tom Addis, who is the former PGA of America national president. And he's now, I think, retired CEO of the Southern California PGA section. And I'm sure a very good friend of Donna and MG, because Donna's husband is also a former national president of the PGA of America. Then we have, is Molly on yet? Molly Marcoux Saman is either on or not going to be joining us. She is the commissioner, the new commissioner of the LPGA. And so we're very honored to have some of our very special guests here, and all of you for joining us today. Anyways, let me get to it, and let me introduce Donna, who's definitely a trailblazer and a highly respected business leader. Some of you know her, but you're really going to get to know her today. So a little background on Donna, and I could go on and on and on, but I will try to make this relatively brief. She's a sports executive and a former collegiate and professional basketball player. She has served as the president of the Women's National Basketball Association, the WMBA, for 6 years, where she solidified its base and led it to double-digit growth in all business aspects. She's also served as senior vice president of the PGA for 17 years, where she oversaw their global television and production businesses. She was responsible for negotiating large television programming contracts for the PGA Tour. Currently, Donna is the founder and CEO of Orender Limited, a Jacksonville-based advisory and consulting firm. As CEO, she launched Generation W, which is a nonprofit organization which provides a platform to educate, empower, inspire, and connect young girls and women through mentorship and national events. And you have a great national event, which we've all been invited to, which is your summit every year, which is absolutely fabulous with some great speakers. According to Donna, Generation W was her proudest professional accomplishment, and we will get talking about that in a little bit. She has been recognized as one of the top most 10 powerful women in sports. Is your head getting bigger yet, Donna? This is good. Hang on to it. And Newsweek recognized her as 100 most influential people in the business of sports. She is also a best-selling author with her release of Wowsdom, The Girl's Guide to Positive and the Girl's Guide to the Positive and Possible. Right. Besides all that, if you're tired already, Donna is also a wife and a mother of twins. She is truly a visionary and a trailblazer. Please welcome my friend and our speaker for today, Donna Orender. Thank you very much for being here. So, can we start? Hi, Donna. How are you?
Good. How's everybody doing?
We're well. What I'd like to start with, if I could, is kind of turn back the clock a little bit. And can you talk a little bit about your basketball playing career? Why you wanted to play? What was the importance of that? Because that kind of goes back a little way, where we all were players, where I was a basketball player, volleyball, we did all that. And somewhat of why that influenced your career, or how it did.
Well, you said we all did all that, and we did. Weren't we lucky that we lived in a time that allowed us to play as many sports as we wanted to or could, even though they got no attention, no resource, no money or fans? It didn't matter. We could do it. And there's something really special about that. I really worry about youth sports today. I worry about the very super young specialization. I worry about the fighting amongst coaches that don't allow kids to really fully develop. But that said, in the 7 sports that I played, actually figured out 8. I was at a group gathering one dinner in California recently, and we were talking about this, and a lot of the women around the table were cheerleaders. And I had the nerve to say cheerleading wasn't a sport, and they all got very mad at me. So we are including cheerleading now as a sport. Of course, it was much different. When we were there, we wore pretty sweaters, skirts. If we did a split, then we were in. That was it. If we could, that was it. But among all the sports I played, and I loved them all, basketball was the one that just sang to me, and it continues to sing to me. It's like a muse. It's like poetry. It's like ballet. All of those kinds of things. And so I found out that I could play it pretty well, and ultimately play it at the highest level in college, be able to be part of really monumental moments in the history of women's sports. Our team was the first women's team to ever play at the Mecca of basketball at Madison Square Garden. We were one of the top 10 teams in the nation all 4 years. And then I ended up playing, for the good fortune of time, I ended up playing in the first women's professional league. So all of those things I think contributed, not only as an athlete, but as a person, understanding that things were happening around me that were important and special and defining, right? Defining from a perspective that ultimately I didn't necessarily own at the time, but now can readily see that I was able to build upon, because clearly now my life really is devoted to the growth, development, opportunity, elevating the voices of women and girls, but in the service of building really vibrant communities.
Wow. Okay. So it's kind of interesting that you talk about, we can start talking about Title IX and all that too, because I probably played about 8 different sports. I was never a cheerleader because I could not do a split. That was not in the cards. But it is interesting that many girls today just play one sport, but we play so many different sports. What do you think the real value of that is?
Well, the research just shows that the development of complementary muscle movement, body, all of that stuff helps you be a better athlete. And when we spend so much time doing repetitive motion, we're golfers too, right? That has a tendency to wear out your body. And then you have the mind aspect of it, where you're stretching your mind in all different ways. And there's such great research now about aging that says the way to keep our minds young is to be able to test them in different ways. So if we make a right turn 10 times, like start making a left turn. And if you apply that thinking to our developing bodies, which is if you're going to constantly do the same thing, then we're not going to be developing other things that would help us make us more fully capable. And so I think that's the impact, that we are really, burning our kids out early. And if you look again at some of that data, so many of these kids are just dropping out of sports, especially young women, and especially young women in urban environments.
We talk a lot about, trying to get more women into golf and young girls. And they say, it's a struggle. I hear from a lot of my students, especially the young girls, they don't have anybody else to play with. And the interesting thing about basketball or volleyball is we had a team. You could play with somebody else. And so they tend to go to soccer a little bit more, and then they drop out. Any thoughts on golf?
Well, actually, when we started our whole movement, I don't know what now, I can't believe it's that long because it feels like it was yesterday, and Tom was there and Nikki was part of it. And I also give Tom a lot of credit for actually putting his arms around Nikki in a way as a leader would, to help encourage new leadership coming behind him. I think that's so important. But what we really want to do is we wanted to get girls playing. We wanted to open up the minds of the industry to how they view women and girls coming up. And I remember, talking about girls feeling lonely, but you know what? It started to catch on. The USGA stepped in, the LPGA stepped in. And I have to just say the PGA Junior Golf League is fantastic because that gives girls a posse by design. And you know what? We all like posses and we all like to be invited. So I think the numbers are pretty strong for girls. The amount of women and girls playing are more than ever before. Could it be better? Yes. Could the environment be better? Yes. Could the recognition and financial remuneration for our professionals? Yes, all that can be, but I think there's a positive movement there. I really do.
Kind of going back to some of the people.
You guys would know better, obviously. I mean, I also just know at the golf courses that the one we have here in Jacksonville, I mean, we have young girls coming all the time, which is really nice.
It's kind of interesting because just going back a little bit of the history, Tom and Nikki, a lot of people don't know who Nikki is. She's now following in Tom's footsteps, but about the male leadership in the PGA of America and how Tom helped bring her up. I don't know the whole story behind that, but about how our male colleagues can really help in leadership with women. Don't you agree? And how that can be done?
Well, absolutely, across every single industry, right? So, and Nikki, to her credit, is a really phenomenal leader. She just is. She's just a star. We knew it when we met her a million years ago. Well, she doesn't look like she's a million years old, so I don't want to put her in that category. But Nikki also wanted it, right? She wanted it, and she's willing to put herself out there. And interesting, I remember early on in our early work, and the program was called Connecting with Her. And it was when the PGA had done a study and found out there were 37,000 women in this country who wanted to play golf, which was bigger than the standing playing base of the day. And they're like, well, how do we do that? And they asked me to come in and ask if I would lead that initiative. And Tom was incredibly supportive of that, as were many other guys, but there were many that weren't. And that's okay too, right? We have to understand the barriers, which we all do too well. And so when I started, we put together a whole presentation. It was called The Purple People, because I tried to take out gender at first. I said, what matters to you? Why do you love this game? Why are you there? Well, you want to bring people in. Well, is it at all people, or is it all people that just look like you? There are a lot of people that don't look like you that want to play this game. And so we began this journey, and it was a fantastic journey. And part of it was the number of PGA professionals. So Tom, I think at the time, or Nikki, maybe you remember, we're at 28,000 now, and maybe 1,000, 2,000 of them are women. And I'm like, we really have to look at how we speak to our PGA women. How are they feeling? What are they hearing? And so I remember flying up to the North California section, Emmy, which I love. I don't think you were there that day. And I wanted a group of only women, because the conversation changes when you make it co-ed, especially when you're trying to talk about issues where people are a little bit more protected. And nobody would really talk. They put two men in the room. That changed it. They were well-intended, but they had all the answers. And then eventually I said to them, okay, let's have a vision exercise. 5 years from now, what percentage of the industry would you like to see women leading? Now, if I asked you that today, which is, maybe 10 years later we did this, I don't know what you would say, but keep your answer. What do you think their answer was?
That's what they would see.
What did they say? Yeah. 5 years from now, I would like it. And by the way, I said to them, this is your game. You can make this happen. You're in control. No one's going to control it for you. What percentage of leadership would you like to see as women in the golf industry?
They probably would say 50%.
You would think so, right? And at the time it was about 5, and they said, well, 10. And I'm like, oh my goodness. But I remember hitting the table saying, at least now we're talking. Now, why would you pick 10? Because we feel so, in some ways, clamped down that our ability to envision and step into where we want to be is somehow hindered by limiting our beliefs. And I said, listen, why wouldn't you say 50? It's your dream. For that matter, if it's your dream, why don't you say 90? And they couldn't go there. And that's applicable across the board today in many industries, right? Opening up our minds and our hearts to what's possible, and then having the courage and the willingness to be able to actually see ourselves through it. Nikki did that, right? And I'm sure, and Jan Beljan did that, right? As an architect, right? She has been our leading female architect forever. And a lot of you have. Emmy's been out there in the North Florida section. I don't want to leave anyone out, but I don't know. Kathy Bissell has been there forever. Like, she's part of my life. We have grown up together. She's part of my life. So the point is that how do we view ourselves, and then how do we take ourselves? And that's why I love WIGI so much. And I was really supportive in the beginning as one of these issues whereby we can really support each other. And people say golf's not a team sport, but I'm going to tell you that every sport's a team sport. Life is a team sport. And when you get out there, you don't get out there by yourself. You got out there because your parents helped you when you were a kid, or your caddy helped you, or your PGA pro helped you. Whoever it is, your friends help you. We really are never quite alone, even though we feel that way. And so hats off to you and your leadership, Kay, for this organization, because I think it's really important, because we are lonely in our spots because there's not enough of us yet.
I totally agree. It's kind of interesting going back to Tom in the Southern California section, just a little footnote, because way back when it was just a men's organization, and somewhere in about the mid 1980s, they allowed women to get into the PGA of America. So I was in the Southern California section at the time, got my PGA standing. And so they always announce you at the meeting. And there was 250 guys in Southern California, and I was the only woman. So I was one of the first 10 in the United States to get my PGA status. But they all stood up and applauded for me. So it was an awesome, welcoming adventure. I mean, and there were so many good friends in the PGA that really helped push me on through my career. So it's the same thing about supporting each other. But I think as women, we really need to learn how to support each other better all the time. You know,
I do. Yes, I do. I think you're right about that. I'll just give you when I got to the PGA Tour, I was like the first woman kind of executive. And all the guys, you know what they have and they love, they have those money clips. And that was the credential of the tour.
That's right.
I said, you know what, I need a credential. And they said, well, we'll give you a pin. I said, no. Wives get pins. I'm not marrying you. I want a money clip. And they kind of all looked at each other. They didn't even know how to respond, because why would they? No one ever asked them for that before, right? But sure enough, I got my money clip. First year, it didn't have my name. I said, that unacceptable. And then eventually I got my name and everybody else got their names, and we had equal credentials. But they're the little things that reveal culture, right? That reveal expectations, that require change and examination of beliefs. And it's one step at a time. Actually, one step at a time doesn't feel like enough these days, right? We want to be leaping in big leaps.
Leaping one big leap, yeah. We're doing the splits again. Yeah, okay. But it's kind of interesting you go back to that, because I was going to ask you about how it is working in a men's organization, and how did you overcome some of that? Obviously, the money clip was a big issue, because we have a lot of women out there that are the same issues, and we're always looking to help each other. How did you get ahead? How did you overcome all that?
Well, it's interesting. I think you asked me about basketball. And because I was a professional athlete, when I stepped in, and by the way, I knew nothing about golf, nothing of all the sports. I mean, I was an Olympic researcher. I knew all about, I could tell you about boxing, Olympic boxing, the history of Olympic boxing, but golf was not kind of the thing. And, but when I stepped in, by that time I had spent years now, I had created, inside the PGA Tour and all these things. I felt like I had accomplished something that many of them hadn't, right? They all had pictures of Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer and whoever else of the day in their wallets, all these young men, they revered them. That's who they wanted to be. And I'm like, you know what? I do too, but I have been able to succeed on my own. I know the world of sports. I know how to compete in it. I know how to talk in it. And I think that really helped me. I really believe that helped me. And it also added to my credibility that, you know what, I couldn't be challenged on understanding the language of sports, which is part of the lessons we put together for the Purple People presentation that we did all over the country, which I did with Nikki and Tom in SoCal. And so at the time, I didn't think of myself as a woman. I thought of myself as one of the guys. I can play basketball with them on Tuesday nights. My golf was coming along, but you know what? I realized they talked a great game. Most of them didn't play a great game. Thank God for our industry, right? It didn't matter. They believed whatever they did. And so I just thought I'd be one of the guys. And it wasn't until many, many years later when my husband said to me, Donna, I'm just going to tell you, you'll never be one of the guys. And I thought,
really?
I thought my feeling was hurt by that. But you know what? He was right. Because there was no one there that gave me the feedback or validated the me that I was. And the fact that I brought things that were so much different than everybody else at the table, other than Tim Finchem one day called me in his office and he said, Johnny, you are different than anybody here. I'm like, yeah, I know, but it's really hard. He goes, don't change. It's what we need. But I was a single, and so that was hard, right? Now, it doesn't mean I didn't have a lot of friends that supported me. I did. But it wasn't until I left all those many years later when I got recruited to run the WNBA that I realized how much pressure I felt in that kind of singular role. None of us want to be a singular. We want to feel like we're part of something, that we're seen for who we are. I laugh because you remember when erectile dysfunction drugs came on the market?
Well, this is going to be.
They were huge golf sponsors, right? And we're in this meeting, and it's me and 31 guys, and they're all talking about ED, and it was hysterical for me. And if they talked about a pregnant woman, they're like, the guys would go all sheepish. I mean, those are the kind of things, like, you kind of remember why you want different voices and people in a room to be representative and knowledge about the people you serve, or your fans or your customers. It was kind of fun.
It's amazing it is amazing some of the conversations that happen, and you just have to kind of keep plowing along, don't you? Can you then, you kind of alluded to, let's talk about the WNBA. You got recruited for that.
Sure, I want to say hi to Debbie too, because I admire Debbie and all of her work that she's done for a long time. Hey, Deb.
Oh, yeah, Debbie's there too. Yeah. It's interesting how the connections is this golf world, and especially this female golf world, is really we know each other very well. And I've gotten a lot of support from you over the years. Same thing with Susie Whaley. We've all supported Susie in getting up into the leadership in the PGA of America. But I always go back to, we've got to support each other more and more and more. Can you talk to me a little bit about the WNBA? You got recruited. Did you feel prepared for the job? I think you were the second one, right?
I was second. The league was definitely not in a place of growth or positioned well in the sports world when I got there. I felt like I was prepared from a business point of view. I always talk about how I was not prepared from a social, cultural point of view. Working in men's professional golf, there was always tons of money. The guys were generally great. I worked so closely with them. Many of them are friends to this day. When I got to the WNBA, and I've been quoted as saying this many, many times, nothing could have prepared me for the anger, the bias, the homophobia, the racism, the lack of sensibility about gender. All of it was like, whoa, what did I say yes to? But ultimately, right, that was it from men, from women, or just the total culture? Both. I mean, that was the other surprising piece. The surprising piece is, I've said this before, I learned the good, the bad, the ugly, and that was from men, but I also learned about it from women. I remember early on, my commissioner, David Stern, God rest his soul, sent me an article from the Wall Street Journal or whatever, and it talked about the 10 top women in business. And he was adorable and motivating, and he wrote my name on the bottom. He said, this is where you'll be. And he always believed that the top women in business would be supporting other women in sports, especially the WNBA, being so out there as we were. And the truth of the matter is, it didn't happen for a long time. It really didn't. Women, what we found, as like whether you're a woman or a person of certain ethnicity and race, if you're singular, you almost don't want to draw attention to that. You don't want to be known as that. I sit on boards now. I don't want to be known as the girl or the woman, because it kind of discounts everything else that you have. And so it was interesting. It took a real long time. I think now, all these years later, we made it through a tough time. Now people are standing up, and I think for the right reasons, for the right business reasons, for the right humanity reasons. So I think we've progressed a long way. So, you're talking about the WNBA too, because you brought it way up and you brought more money into it. You made good partnerships. You talk to corporations. Talk a little bit about kind of how you managed all that. I mean, did you have your background in business? Because you said you felt very comfortable in it. Did you make it up as you went? Well, no. Well, listen, I came from the PGA Tour. And, by the time I had come over, I was in the office of the commissioner. I had run our production business. I had grown it from a non-entity to a $35 million, 100-person employee business. I sold our sponsorships. I built a global media distribution market, distribution, production, programming business. I built our, international television business, took it over from IMG, which, by the way, they didn't talk to me, which is so interesting, right? So interesting. Imagine, here I am, young woman in a room with the top leaders in international golf television in the world, truly, highly respected, the Olympic guy, whatever. And he was like toying with me as if like I was a toy. Well, Donna, we got this. And I'm like, okay, you have that, but here's what I have, which is 4X of what you're offering us. Okay? Well, blah, 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 whatever. So, they all leave. And to Tim's credit, he calls me and he says, what do you think? I said, listen, it's your choice. You have option A is this, option B is this. He goes, okay, we'll go with option B, which meant that we changed our whole business model based on that. And you know what? Instead of them wanting to hire me because I out-negotiated them, they shunned me. Like, really? Really? If I was a guy, they'd want me to staff in a second. I still look back on that. And the guy I negotiated, we ultimately started to talk to each other because he started to talk to me. I held nothing against him, but he was so mad at me that I could do that. And I'm thinking, why would you be mad at me? I'm doing my job. I just did mine better than you did yours.
Don't you think it kind of went to the ego? His ego was hurt because he thought that as a woman he should out negotiate you.
Of course, and I would see it consistently, and then it gets played back and how they communicate about your behavior or how you. And I'm saying like I'm not that different than this guy, and I'm not saying anything different than that guy, but I didn't have the same kind of grace, if you will, to be able to be that guy. I still had to be mom or the girl or whatever that is. And I didn't understand it at the time, but I see it much better now. And I still see it playing out across our political spectrum. And what I do with Generation W now, it's not about politics. It's about building community. It's about finding, like-mindedness and the things that bring us together. But it was interesting. I had a conversation the other day with friends, and maybe all of you could understand this. We're talking about women candidates, and somebody said, what is the right woman candidate for president? Like, what does she have to be? This one wasn't good because of this. This wasn't good for this. This one wasn't good for this. It's almost like there's an excuse for every woman. Like, where do we fit in? And how do we fit in? Where the dominant seems to say, oh, she's okay. It's so interesting to me. I thought it was a really interesting conversation. It really made me continue to think about the pressures on women and how we are shape-fitted, if you will, to fit in a culture that continues to now react in a way that I don't think is in our collective best interest. Because I do believe when you elevate women and girls, you elevate us all. So if you put down women and girls, guess what? You diminish yourself and the world we live in. I couldn't feel more strongly about that.
So I think what we should do is nominate you for president.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. By the way, is there a dirtier business? Right? You know what? I wonder why. I mean, who would want to in any way put themselves out there and have their whole lives torn to shreds? Right? I mean, I see ads today of people I know, and I'm thinking, shame on you. How could you even say that? And yet they do, because it's part of the game. You know what? I love games, but that's not the game I want to play.
No, we can talk about games, and we can talk about sportsmanship, and it's the same thing. And there used to be more respect, and even when you lost at any game, there was still respect for the other team because they just happened to play better than you did the other day. But there's no reason to badmouth them. So there really are a lot of things, I think, in life, in sports, that can teach us a lot of life lessons.
Oh, without a doubt. And are we seeing the biggest one being played right now? I don't know if you wanted to talk about this, and we don't have to at length, but isn't the LIV tour and the PGA tour really about a culture clash? And listen, you can get into a great deal about all of it, but top line, right? It feels like there's a real culture clash, and it's about values. And listen, they're both about money. But how does that money get expressed, and how is that money? It's so interesting, right? All the way around. So we don't have to talk about that. But I'm just.
There is a lot. I mean, a lot of different facets to that whole thing, and it's all about money. A lot of the people got their fame and fortune through the PGA Tour. Correct. So that's how they got to those positions to even make more money. So, I mean, there's a lot of behind the scenes things that people don't ever see. It's the same thing with the LPGA. There's a lot that goes on, a lot of support that goes on to get the money there.
Right. Which, congratulations to them. I'm so glad I was able to visit with Molly a couple of weeks ago, and $91 million in purses. I happen to be involved, and as you well know, Kay, with an event here that we bring our programming to. We do things called Links to Leadership, which is, we had, I think, 60 of the up and coming young professionals who are playing on the tertiary tour. So not the Epson or the LPGA tour, but dedicating their lives for literally no money, no attention. It's pitiful. Again, if you look at the opportunities for men, which are like 100x what they are for our women, who we're bringing to the game in numbers. We're saying, come play, but then we're not supporting them in their next phases of development. We got to figure that out, but I'm happy to be able to support them. And so I think November 3rd, we will have our next cohort of between 50 and 60 women. We bring in women who mentor. We will talk this year. Interestingly, what they're very interested in is, one, mental health. So mental health in sports and athletes, as we know, has been a big thing. And the second thing we'll talk about is like opportunities. And so actually, Tom and Nikki, we've talked to the PGA about bringing in one of their career advisors, because sometimes our vision of what's possible, remember we talked about earlier, is very narrow. And let's just open it up and say, hey, if you're going to play professionally, great. If you want to do other things, here's some other opportunities for you. And here are people who will support you. Hello.
Well, it's kind of interesting because, when I became part of women in the golf industry, and it was Kathy Bistel's vision, her daughter pushed her into saying, there's many different types of careers in the golf industry, from, let's say, Jan. And there's even a woman that's a member, I don't know if she's on right now. She sells sand. And it was so fascinating to hear her talk about all the different kinds of sand there are. But again, and there's another one that's she works in maintenance and the end of the whole thing, a big machinery, and she's out there with just the guys, and she's this little thing just doing this thing. So there's many different careers. You just don't have to end up being a professional. But again, their vision, as you said, is very limited, of thinking of what can I do with golf or anything in the sports industry, because there's a lot to do. Definitely.
So much. And kudos to Kathy and the vision, right? Let's look, because it's really paying it forward in such a tremendous way.
Correct. And and there's Jan doing the same thing. Okay. Now, a lot of people don't know much about Generation W. Can you tell that started in 2005? You've been the CEO of that.
No, I was in the WMBA from 2005 to 2006 seasons at the WMBA. Then I came home to Jacksonville. I had spent most of my career traveling, and I realized that I loved it here. I live in Jacksonville Beach, and I wanted to give something back to my city. And then I said, well, what happens if they don't like it? And I said, well, then they'll tell me and I'll do something else, which would be fine. But I realized that when I traveled around the country and the world, that there were great women and people everywhere. And they may not be the obvious candidates. There's always a uber, A-list power group in every city. And they might not be the group that was going to create a WNBA team. There were other groups, but they had to go find them. And that was kind of motivation for me. I thought there were tremendous people. Kathy can speak that she lived in this community. Are you still living in Ponte Vedra?
Oh, yes.
So, there's great people here, and there's people constantly coming in. And I said I wanted to create something that would help elevate the opportunities and the voices of, I started out with women. And, this is a southern town. I don't know how many of you live in the South, but it has its own ways. I'm originally from the North. And I thought that there was and there still is, like this old boys network that thinks they can run everything, and they do. And I thought that we needed to have a little more visibility and get our arms around each other, find our commonalities and grow. And so I put together this event, a thought leadership event. And I have to say, year one, I had a couple of partners, including the PGA Tour. 700 people showed up. I had 50 speakers, women that I met from all over, who just said, if you do something, we'll show up. And you know what? That is the most important thing, is showing up for each other. And they did. And they weren't big names, but they were great storytellers who had so much to give that could teach us, that people loved it. And so year two, when happened, and in year two, I decided to introduce something on girls, because I felt like at the end of the day, we're all girls at heart. Never lose our heart as a girl. And so that led to our creation of Generation WOW, which is our Teen Girl Mentorship and Leadership Program. And so now we're just celebrated 10 years for our 11th year. Now it's going to be our 12th year for Gen W. It's going to be our 10th year for Gen WOW. And we're starting to really grow. Our board wants us to really take it nationally. So we'll be in Portland, where I will get to see you, right?
Betty?
In September, and Generation W continues to provide programming such as Links to Leadership for companies that helps women. But honestly, connecting to men is really important, and the greater cultural zeitgeist is really important as well. And so it's my way of giving back. It's my feeling that the world's been good to me, and I want to make sure that I can be good back to it. I mean, I sit on a bunch of other boards, and I sit on public company boards, and I consult on other sporting, things, but this truly is at the core of my heart.
It's fascinating for what you do. So I think one of the questions that I came in through the chat and listening to you talk, and you're on this board, that board, this, plus this, and everything that you do. Any comments on work-life balance?
So work-life balance. So there was a great answer that I really kind of put my arms around, which is the idea of balance. I mean, I think we're perfectly imbalanced. Maybe we're imperfectly balanced, and that creates imperfect balance. I just think life is filled with ebbs and flows. It's also filled with times for certain things than others. And so therefore, there were times in my life whereby I was head down 100%, got to get this work done. I had little kids, that made it hard, but I also commuted, so that made it easier. I think I think you have to understand that we're not perfectly balanced, and it's okay. It's okay to move through the imbalance imperfectly, provided you keep your eye on what you want, what's important to you, and how you want to accomplish that.
That's an interesting way of saying that, because we hear this work-life balance all the time. It's really, we are kind of always trying to get back to the center or whatever. So we're always a little bit off balance. But no, that's very interesting. Do you want to talk a little bit about your book, Wowsdom? I love the name.
Yeah, so what happens was, so we brought in our teen girls, and I always do something in the big session, Baz might have seen it, that involves girls and women. And so one year I had women who were 65 and older and teen girls, and I called it Wowsdom. And it was the wow of girls and the wisdom of women, Wowsdom. And they got together, and you couldn't get in their group. Like there was like this force field around them. I said, wow, this is incredible. We need to do a book. The desire for intergenerational learning here is powerful. We do this thing called Letters to My Future and Younger Self, and we use that as a basis where people write these incredible letters that, really are lessons for all of us, but they're so open and so human that the vulnerability just transcends the generations. And then it has like 60 pages of things on finance and nutrition, all the things you don't necessarily learn in school, but you wish someone would tell you in a way that you can learn. And so that book now has become the curriculum that we use in schools for our clubs, for our teen girls. It was a joy to write, and now we're trying to figure out what our next version of that book is, because it's been really popular and helpful, and people have really loved it. So you can get it on Amazon. It's not very expensive, but each page was individually hand painted, and it's beautiful, and you can write in it. My mother loved it, so my mother read it when she was 82. So listen, like I said, there's the heart of a girl in all of us.
How did you come up with the concept of the 65-year-olds with the teenage girls? I mean, where did that come from?
Well, I think it comes from a couple of different places. Like, how often do we think, oh, you know what, the younger kids, they don't get it. Like, let's talk about Title IX for a second. I've done a lot of stuff on Title IX. I'm sure all of you have as well. And last year, as you know, Kay, I had Billie Jean and Alana come, and we had a great conversation. And I realized that it's kind of like younger women do not know who Billie Jean King is. And I find that maddening, because what this woman has done for all of us is extraordinary. And so therefore I'm like thinking, if we don't teach these younger women what happened before them, it's so fleeting. As we're seeing now, it can be gone. It's ephemeral, right? Oh, we expect it to be like this. We can never expect it to be like that. And so some of it was from like, you know what? The young women have so much to learn from older women who've been through it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we forget that. And the older women are invigorated and energized by what they can learn from these younger women. And so it's this incredible positivity cycle, right, of like goodness. And that's where it came from.
Well, I think it's fascinating, and I truly believe in it, because it's really about sharing information. And people really, you really need to understand the history of how you got to there, or even on the tour, how that all came about, from the original founding members, et cetera, et cetera. So I think sometimes as women, we don't want to share enough information. And some of my mentors, I can talk about mentoring. Once I learned that lesson, it's share everything that you've got, and more came back in. And I think that that's one of the biggest lessons. And I know that you would agree with that.
That with 1000%. And the book is Wowsdom, The Girl's Guide to the Positive and the Possible. And I have to restock my little shelf here. Usually my mom calls me. She goes, "Oh, I just met somebody and they would really love your book. And can I buy it?" And I'm saying, "Yes, Mom, you can buy it."
Any thoughts on Title IX? Because it's 50 years. It obviously was needed. Do you think it had a large effect? Do you think it has had a big enough effect?
Extraordinary effect. I mean, extraordinary impact on what's happened, because without Title IX, I don't think that the opportunity for women to compete or resources being dedicated to women competing would have happened. Now, if any of you know of Nancy Hogshead Makar, who's probably the foremost expert, who happens to live here, she was an Olympic swimmer, so we've done a lot of stuff together. The data is such that, the percentage of schools abiding by the law is small. Now, that said, the exponential growth in dollars and resources being allocated to women and girls sports is, has been really significant. So I don't think we get there without Title IX, and I don't think we stay there without Title IX.
Well, it's kind of interesting, because I can remember I stood up because when I was in college, and out of our tuition fee, there was 10 cents allotted for girls' sports. And I finally went to the administration and I stood up, and they kind of shot me down. I said, this isn't right, because men's sports are too much. But Title IX has definitely increased that. Kathy Bissell would like to ask you a question.
I grew up before Title IX. We had no sports for girls. If my parents hadn't belonged to a country club, I wouldn't have learned how to play golf. This is really great, because you'll have opportunities to do things that you never could. There was no place for you to go. There were no things for you to do, and you were excluded from all this other stuff. And as life has gone on, I've seen how more and more men form their old boys network through sports. And even if they didn't play with another guy, they played opposite them on some other team. Or for instance, with the college golfers, they all know each other because they played against each other growing up the whole time. So it just shut us out of that entire experience until Title IX came along.
Jan Bell.
Where's Title IX going to go now, with everything that's stirring?
Hard to say. There's so many other targets that I don't know that this is where somebody says, "Oh, we're gonna strike down Title IX." I don't think that's going to happen, Jan. The question is, with everything happening in collegiate sports today, which, by the way, the leaders of collegiate sports don't even know how to manage the new NIL and how everyone's getting paid, et cetera. It will be interesting to see how Title IX is impacted. Because the question, do you have to ensure that all of your women and male athletes make the same? I don't think they do. I think they have to just ensure opportunity. And I think it's kind of in the culture. Some schools are better than others. I don't know. I don't think it's going to get shot down. But I do think, I don't know whether it's going to get supercharged either. I will tell you that what I am seeing on the professional level is a greater commitment to investment. Is it enough? No. Is it where it should be? No. But there is an awareness now, right? There's a responsibility to shareholders, of customers, vendors, that says, by the way, you put all your money here. And maybe you should be spreading that out. And we didn't hear enough of that growing up. We didn't hear enough of that early years of the WMBA, but now we are. So I think that's really important.
So at least it's a bit of a trend, and some trends last longer than others.
I think it's more than a trend. It is legislation. It is legislation. It is on the books, right? There are many, many cases that have been brought, that have been won on behalf of the good girls. So, I don't think it's a trend per se.
It's a trend for investors.
Yes. No. That's right. Because it aligns with all the ESG, all the environmental, sustainability, governance aspects of being part of companies. And this equitability speaks to that. I happen to sit on the board of the World Surf League, and we pay our championship tour athletes, both male and female, the same amount of purse money. I can tell you that is validating and satisfying. There's a lot more money still behind the men than the women, but we're working at it. And what I've seen internally, whereas I would come in and there'd be a sales video and every single wave would be by a guy, now there's greater awareness that, our women surfers are as artistic or as athletic, right? Their competition is as meaningful and impactful. That's taken a while, but it's happening.
So, Donna, are you familiar with the GIST?
I am not.
Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar, it is an online periodical that comes daily, and it is all about empowering women through sports, and whether they're telling a story about kind of what's going on in the world of sports, even if it's a men's related sport, so that women could talk educatedly around the water cooler, the proverbial water cooler, if you will, so that you could be part of a conversation, and really what to look for. And things are highlighted so you can drill down to get to the story behind it. However, most of it really is about stories celebrating women in sports and about politically what's going on or socially what's going on. They have 3 different issues that you can register for, and it's all free. And one of them happens to be about the business of women's sports. And so they will feature stories about organizations that are sponsoring women's sports, even to the extent of, here are the stock tickers this week on these 3 particular stocks that are investing or sponsoring. And it could be something women's collegiately, it could be women's soccer, it could be women's track. It's GIST, and I'd recommend everybody to at least check it out. But I think it's really enlightening and party to the conversation that we're having, especially with respect to the sponsorship dollars and things of, equality and news stories and what we're putting up with and what we're not putting up with and those types of things. So
thank you, appreciate it. I do want to say before we go, because you're giving me this chance, we're always looking for golf professionals and general managers, because my husband and I always have this discussion about hiring more women. He's always been out front about it, like Tom has been. So it's just a function of people who are interested in the work, finding people who want them. So I'm putting it out there. So if you know of anybody, general manager for some clubs, that would be great.
Okay. Let me just talk a little bit about MG. So I through Donna, I had the opportunity to meet MG a number of times, but I loved him, and I was trying to tell him about my philosophy of teaching. He said, get on with it. Just tell me what you want. He was straight to the point, and I loved it because it was just like bullet points. And then he said, what do you need? I told him 3 things, shook my hand. He said, we got a deal. So it was, he's, does that sound like MG?
Totally. Somebody sent me an email last night about some PR for some golf course. And I sent it to him. And within like 10 minutes, he had responded, it was done. He responded. I'm like, I got it. I wish I could move as quickly as him, but I don't.
Yeah. I have one probably getting towards the end here. One last question is, reaching our own individuals' communities. What do you think would be one thing, your thought, that we could do in our own community, that anyone could do that to help empower young girls or women?
It's funny. We were having a talk about that earlier today. And, there's a lot of talk about mental health, and I get it. I totally get it. And I think if every one of us could reach out to one other person, it's gonna be one. And if it's a young woman, just to let them know that you see them and that you're there to support them in some way. I think that goes a long way. I think we should recognize more than we currently do that a text of support, a text of encouragement, the ability to be present for a half an hour for a conversation, all those things really matter. And I've always believed that, incremental steps creates exponential change. And I know we're all busy because we're women. And yet, no matter how busy women are, they'll always say, what else can I do? Why do we do that? I do not know. Then we go home and say, why do I say yes to everything? We have to learn how to say no. And we don't. Because fundamentally, I think we understand that those little moments are life-changing for other people. And we appreciate them when they come to us. And therefore, we want to pay it forward. So that would be my simple, very, I think, actionable advice.
I think that's great, because I find that in my lessons that sometimes they just want to talk and they want to just share. It's not just always about the golf swing, and to pay attention if we see somebody in need. So I totally agree with you. And it's about reaching out. And sometimes we're afraid to do that in a very small way. So, well, number one, anyways, we appreciate your time, your insights. We could go on for hours. We will send, again, if Donna's a member, if you haven't joined WIGI yet, we encourage you to join. Please go to the website. But Donna, I want to if everybody wants to take themselves off mute, and please give her a round of applause. I appreciate your friendship, your insights. Thank you very much.